How do backups play into recovery from a corrupt database?
Well, backups, good backups, solid backups are frankly the absolute most important thing that you can have to help with database corruption. So a lot of people will say, well, I've got 3 or 4 days worth of backups and that's all I have space for. We can't afford a bigger disk to store the backups on. Well, having good backups can help you fill in those holes during a corruption repair. So let's say today's Wednesday, and on Monday you had corruption introduced, that you lost some amount of data in your database because of that corruption. Well, if we could go back to Monday morning or Monday right before that corruption happened and pull those missing rows out of that backup and put them back into your databases being repaired, you've got a much greater likelihood of being able to have 100% data recovery. But if you only have an occasional full backup, or you don't have the ability to do a point-in-time restore, well, you're really having your hands tied on what can be done on that repair. A lot of the time when we do a repair, we'll recover everything we can out of the corrupt database and then figure out where the holes are, what's missing, and then bring those things in from one or more backups. And if you don't have good backups, well, we lose that ability to bring in and fill in those missing holes of data. So my recommendation on that is that, and this is whether you're dealing with corruption or not, but it's definitely going to help you with corruption, is that if you have full backups regularly, you have diff backups, which the diff backup is everything that's changed since the last full, and then you have log backups, and the log backup is everything that's changed since the last log backup. So with the combination of those three, you can pretty much do a point-in-time recovery for any minute or even up to the second during that window that you have backups for. Now, one of the key things that you need to do, though, is you need to make sure that those backups are on different storage than your SQL Server data and log files, so that if corruption is, let's just say you've got one of those basic setups where you've just got a C drive, and on your C drive you've got your operating system, you've got your data files, you've got your log files, and you're also writing your backups to the C drive. Those aren't backups. And the reason I say that is that if something happens to that C drive, or even if it's a C, D, and E drive that are spread over the same spinning disk, or not spinning disk, but the same physical disk, well, if something goes bad on that disk, all of those locations are going to be bad. So if you have local storage, we recommend your backups go to network storage somewhere. If you have network attached storage or a SAN, we recommend that your backups go to some other type of network attached storage that is different than that SAN. And some people will say, well, can I just write my backups to the same drive as my data files and then copy those backups off to the network? Well, no, the problem is if you have corruption that's introduced by bad IO on that disk where your data is, if you're putting your backups there, your backups are going to be broken or worthless as well. So you got to make sure those backups are on different storage. The other thing with backups is you really need to focus on the retention period. Now, lots of people I talk to when we're dealing with corruption say, well, at least those that have backups, they say, well, we've got 3 or 4 days worth of backups because that's all the storage we have, or that's all the disk space that we have storage for. Well, that's not true, because usually if you take a look at an alternate backup method, like let's say you're backing up full backups daily for 4 days, and that's taking up 100 gigs of storage. Let's just make up some numbers here. Well, there's different backup schedules that we can do that can take up that same 100 gigs of storage or less and give you a longer retention period. For instance, if we just turn on backup compression, if you don't already have that turned on, well, that'll give you faster backups and faster restores. And if you happen to say, well, I can't do backup compression because I have transparent data encryption enabled, you need to look into this more, because if you have TDE on SQL Server 2017 or newer, you can change some of your backup settings so you will indeed get compression on your TDE encrypted databases. So just by turning on backup compression, you may be able to get almost twice the amount of backup stored in the same space. But then you take it and you change it. Instead of saying, well, I'm going to do a full backup every single day, and those 4 full backups for all my databases equals 100 gigs, Well, what if I instead say I'm going to do a weekly full backup, and I'm going to keep those for 3 weeks? So that's going to take up less space than those daily fulls are going to take. And then we're also going to compress them, which is going to take up even less space. And then I want to do differential backups daily, and we're going to keep those for, let's say, 2 weeks. And depending on how much change is happening in your database, those 2 weeks worth of diff backups may be less than one full backup in space. And then we're going to do log backups every 5 minutes, and we're going to keep those for 1 week. Well, you might be able to do that 3 weeks of fulls, diffs, and logs and keep them for a much greater amount of time while still saving space overall, and end up with 3 weeks worth of coverage on your backups rather than 4 days worth of coverage on your backups. So the thing you really need to focus, I mean, the question I always ask when we're doing a corruption repair is, when was your last good backup before corruption was discovered? And it might be, I mean, the answers I've heard to that are, the great ones are, well, corruption was introduced on Tuesday and we have a backup from Tuesday morning before corruption was there. That's about as good of an answer as you can get. Well, but the reality is, quite often I ask that question and they say, well, one, we don't know when corruption was discovered. I mean, we just found out about it today, but it may have been there for a month because they don't have CHECKDB running regularly. Or they say, well, we thought we were running daily backups, but those have been failing for 4 months because of whatever reason, and we don't have any good backups. That's kind of the worst case scenario. So with that, my recommendation, I mean, backups are key in being able to get back to a good state. And we've even done corruption repair where the way we repaired it was we applied a full backup, we applied a diff backup, and then we just replayed the transaction logs up to the current point in time. And because all those backups were stored on different locations than the corrupt databases, we were able to get past the corruption and rebuild the entire database just by using those full diff and log backups. So yeah, backups are probably the most important thing in recovering from a corrupt database.
Yeah.